My new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, is now out and available for you to read and purchase. You can check out our website, willowhealing.org, to find a link, or you can find it on Amazon. We look forward to getting your feedback, and if you love it, please leave a review and share with your friends. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine Cristani with another episode of Willow Healing Matters, and today I am joined by author and therapist Dr. Chad Scott. He is a best-selling author, therapist, and explorer who helps audiences find healing and purpose through stories of dark tourism and silence. I did read that right. Yes. Liver transplant survivor. He blends mental health insight with real-world travel to inspire growth, reflection, and meaningful change. So a big welcome to the show, Dr. Chad.
Well, thank you, Catherine, for having me. I've been looking forward to chatting with you and your listeners.
So I guess there's so much to unpack there. I feel like the first thing I want to ask is, being a liver transplant survivor, I feel like a lot of people don't know how hard, high the rates of mortality are for your body not rejecting the organ and that sort of thing.
So really, the rates aren't really that high of rejection. The rates of rejection are high, but the rates of like a fatality from rejection are pretty low. So I get blood work. It was every week, and then it, every 2 weeks, and then once a month, and now it's at once every 2 months. I had my transplant a year and a half ago. And then I think I'll get to a point where I just need blood work every 6 months or a year or something like that. And they can tell the signs of rejection through blood work long before it starts affecting you. And the vast majority of the time, it goes back to normal. So rejection rates are high, but where it becomes actually a problem is pretty low.
Did it feel different having someone else's liver transplanted into you? I've always been curious about this.
Well, okay, so I would say 100% I feel different because I was sick.
Yes.
I was sick. And what was interesting was I didn't realize how long I was sick for. So I had been sick for 10 plus years, because when I got my liver, I woke up, and I don't think it was the painkillers, but maybe that had a part of it. But I felt so good. I just knew my life was different as soon as I woke up. I took my phone, and I had a thing in my mouth, so I couldn't really get out of bed or anything. So I was on a catheter, and so I couldn't get out of bed. But I took my phone and looked at my eyes. I'm like, oh my God, my eyes are so white. I didn't realize how yellow they were before. I just thought, and my skin even, I could just tell right away. So my life was completely changed. So I'm 47 years old. I literally feel like how I felt when I was in my 20s. I mean, I was swimming laps yesterday, and it's like those types of things I couldn't do for many years. So that was life-changing. Having another person's liver in me, I haven't noticed anything like that. I'm a therapist, and it's like I'm pretty acutely aware of differences and that kind of thing. So I don't think, there's any mystical type change in me or personality change because of that. I just feel like me just well. But I do think about my donor every day, though. And I don't know who my donor is. I could write a letter to their family, and they delivered it to the family, but I'd never heard back. So I think about them, but I have no idea who they are. I've gone out to the memorial wall and honored him. I know it was a him. Don't know a lot of details, but yeah, so he's my hero, and don't know who he is.
Yeah, and I guess it's why, like, every day if that was me, just in your shoes, I'd be like, every day would be a blessing, right? And then you just take full advantage of each day that you've got this second wind.
Yeah, 100%. I don't take a second for granted. And even long before this, I didn't take a second for granted. And that's where my book comes into play too, as I went to a lot of these dark tourism spots around the world.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yeah, okay. I'll let you ask the question then. Okay.
What is dark tourism? I have no idea.
So dark tourism. Most people have gone to dark tourism spots. So dark tourism spots are on a very wide spectrum, from entertainment orientated types of places. So in Europe, they have like the London Dungeon, the Berlin Dungeon.
Oh, yes.
Throughout the world, they have ghost tours, and and those are kind of fun and interesting, and you learn something about history. And so that's on one end. And on the exact opposite end are the most, profound places of like genocide, like the Auschwitz and the Kigali genocide memorial, and Cambodia
I would add
spot in
9/11
Cambodia. Yeah.
to that too.
Yeah, 9/11.
Yeah.
Oh, there's all kinds of, yeah. So those are
Yeah.
the kind of the most profound, those types of places, and even places associated with slavery, and like in the United States here, we have the Whitney Plantation, which is down by New Orleans, and it's just a profound experience because it tells, there's many plantations, and a lot of people go to them because of the beauty. It's like, well, I don't want to go to a plantation and learn about the history of its owners and crap like that. I want to learn about the real history, and so there's a place down in New Orleans, or by New Orleans, that it tells it from the slavery point of view, and the children that were there, and it talked about people being buried alive and scratching out their own eyeballs, and it's horrific. And I want to say this about dark tourism, especially on the darker side of the spectrum, is when you go in with a lot of empathy and a lot of reverence for what happened in those places, it's not a good feeling. You feel sick. It's kind of like going to a funeral of a really close relative. Yeah. It's kind of that same type of feeling. It's just not a good feeling. But because you went through there, it really feels like you're honoring them. You're carrying the torch to their story a little bit. And it also, you see little pieces of yourself in there. It's like when you go in with a lot of empathy, you start, kind of putting yourself a little bit in their shoes. If you're a person who is capable of decent empathy, you really get learn about yourself going through those places. And because of that, you can go through your own dark times with a little more ease, because you don't just, you don't feel so alone in your suffering.
Yeah, that's such an interesting perspective. So for me personally, because I'm quite intuitive, I cannot go to those places. I find it too overwhelming. I find it too much. And I hear everything. I hear it and I see it. So before I even stepped into my gifts, when I went to 9/11 with my ex-husband, I remember we walked around the corner because I hadn't rebuilt them yet. But I walked around the corner, and there was this threshold, and I stepped over the threshold, and I heard the screaming. I felt the pain. I saw the burning, and I actually had to step back. And he's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I can't go in there." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I cannot go in there." And so I sat on this little bench on this threshold, and he just went in and he did what he needed to do, and then we left again. Yeah. But it was the same with cemeteries. But I also feel it's like, because I've been called to like clear souls at like a big level, like clear stuck souls and clear like a lot of things. So I feel at that point it was so overwhelming, I couldn't do it. And even now, if I went to a place like that, I'd need a team, because I know I if I was pulled to those places, I'd be there to clear things. There was even this castle in Slovenia, and I remember this castle itself had like this really dark, like, I don't know how they lived in there. It was terrible. Like, it was just cold and horrible. Anyway, and there was this room, and the tour guide was kind of like saying, "Oh, it's this," and I'm like, "That is not what happened in there," And like you were saying, you can kind of feel the energy of the place and everything like that. And it's interesting how you go in with that perspective of looking at it and hearing people's stories and having that come from it.
And what I would say is, because it's on a big spectrum, so you could go to maybe some more of the places where there isn't quite as darkness, or possibly museums that aren't on the site of, like a medical museum or something, or, but some people may, but I would, if I, we're trying to convince you, I would say, nothing grows inside of a comfort zone. So I feel that you need, so if your comfort zone is, maybe even just reading a book, about it, but trying to take a little step in that direction. And because there's so much learning in there, because, the average person anyway, and maybe you're not the average person when it comes to that kind of stuff, but when it comes to the average person, they learn much more by experiencing something that resonates with their emotions. And those places I would rate them, and I've been to a lot of religious sites too. I've been to Jerusalem, and I've been to the Vatican and churches and stuff around the world. And dark tourism spots, you get a lot of the similar reflections you do in some of the more profound religious spots. It's, it's the, the meaning of life. What is my purpose for being here? And so I would say, take a little leap in that direction because you learn so much more. It stores in a different part of your brain called the hippocampus. And when you step in those places, that's where it's stored, versus if you read a book, you just tend to, oftentimes lose what you're, unless you keep repeating it.
Yeah. it's funny because I didn't realize, because when I was at school, I studied I did modern history, I studied the Arab-Israeli conflict, I studied World War II, and even afterwards, I was still interested in modern history. And I really wanted to go visit those places in Europe to understand it. But then at the same time, I was like, my system was like, nope. And it's not out of disrespect or anything like that, because I had to actually train myself to go to cemeteries, because when I was younger, I never understood why it was so overwhelming. But then when I was older, and had that understanding from, being more spiritual and that sort of thing, when I walk into them, I'm like, now I understand why this was so overwhelming for me as a child and as a teenager. And like, why, my dad would go visit my grandmother's grave, and he's like, do you want to get out of the car? And I was like, nope, I can't. Whereas, when I had to go bury my grandfather in the same place, I could see the beauty in that and see the beauty at the end of their life and that sort of thing. But also those souls had been honored versus the places that you're saying, which is so interesting, where there was not really that honoring, but now people have to come and honor that so that they can be respected and remembered in a way that affects them as well.
Yeah. When you walk down, so probably the most profound moment of my dark tourism journey was at Auschwitz. And you get to there's one gas chamber still. It's called Crematorium 1, but it's a gas chamber / crematorium. And it's still standing. And you walk down these stairs that, thousands of men, women, and children walk down. And you go into it looks like a regular basement that's completely bare in cement. And I remember standing there, my tour group had walked through to the next room, and I'm like, gosh, that was just too fast, because the significance of this room, it just stopped me in my tracks. And it's like, I'm getting choked up even talking about it, where, I kind of had a similar experience as you, I think, is where it's like, I could almost picture the people just collapsing one by one in there, and like just sadness seeped from every little crack in that room. And I felt sick. I felt like throwing up. And, and I like children, especially thinking about children. I mean, it just eats at me. And then you go to the next room, and they have the crematorium furnaces and with rail tracks. I mean, just like you could see the industrial, how large that was, if they have rail tracks. And then you walk out the other side. But anyway, there was a plaque going in there. It's like, this is a place of honor, and silence and reflection. And I think if you go in with that attitude, I didn't walk out the other side the same person. I walked out a better version of myself. It was such a relief to be to the other side of it. But like, I knew my life was changed forever. And that experience has really, has changed me in ways that I still am learning.
Yeah, even, I don't know, have you been to the catacombs in Rome? I'm assuming, have you been to the catacombs?
No. Actually, in Paris, I've been to the catacombs. I haven't been to the catacombs in Rome. I've been down in the crypt beneath St. Peter's Square, but not the catacombs.
I think I'm in the right place, I think, mentally. But it was interesting because going down there, like it's not a feeling of death, but there's a feeling of fear, because a lot of the people that were down there at the time were hiding, and and you can feel that energy, you can just feel it. And I remember saying to my ex at the time, I'm like, we need to get out of here. Like, I don't know where the thing is, but this is really overwhelming for me, and I guess it's just, and it wasn't like my fear from it. And even the same thing, it's just like what you said, it's your choice and your mindset of when you go into that. And then I guess I'm curious then how you've used those experiences then to shape into your book. Let's be my next question.
Well, okay. So it's multi-layered. So I'll tell you how I came up with the book, because I never intended to write a book on dark tourism. It kind of found me. So after I was at Auschwitz, I went to Oslo, and I started getting sick in Oslo, and I didn't get out, and I was on just a vacation trip, holiday, whatever, and I was reading a National Geographic article, and they talked about dark tourism, and they said it was an academic discipline, and they looked at the different places that dark tourists go, and the different motivations. So some people go for real like history and reverence, like I do, and some people are more just going for the sensationalism of it. So it was a guy named Philip Stone. So fast forward, he well, I had my liver transplant. I was getting sick. My liver was, I mean, that was just the end of my liver's functioning. So I was put on the transplant list about a month later, and then I was given a transplant about a month after that. And I recovered really fast. Like I said, I felt better right away, and it was just a matter of recovering from the actual surgery. And I was out in Los Angeles about 6 weeks after my transplant, just to kind of get more exercise, because it was cold back in Minnesota here. So I wasn't getting exercise. So I wanted to go out walking. And I found myself in Hollywood. Out of all the things you can do in LA, I'm in a graveyard in Hollywood. And then the next day I'm in a graveyard in Beverly Hills. And, and looking at celebrity graves. And it just occurred to me that it's like, I am a dark tourist, for one. I'm like it talked about in that book, or the National Geographic article. And then also I was benefiting a lot from going to these places, reflecting. So I call it reflective dark tourism. So you're going to these places and you're reflecting on, their suffering, their lives. In Hollywood, they had a lot of successes. You look at Burt Reynolds or gosh, who else did I see there? Chris Cornell, Marilyn Monroe, Rodney Dangerfield, like all these celebrities. But they also had that other side too, where, a lot of them had difficulties. And I'm trying to think of the Somewhere Over the Rainbow, the Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland. She's from close to where I live in Minnesota. And, and she had a lot of struggles and men treating her certain ways. And, and so you reflect on their successes, their failures, their difficulties, and how resilient they were to become as famous as they were. So anyway, so I had all this energy after having my transplant, and it just occurred to me that it's like, I need to tell people about dark tourism, and I decided to write the book without really looking at the research, because I wanted it to be my story as a therapist. So I'm going through these places sort of as this tour guide, but also, I talk about maybe 35 different dark tourist spots around the world in the book. And I talk about my own story and how they helped me in my own recovery from, a really hard divorce that I went through about 8 years ago. And then how it helped me get through my illness and my transplant, and how much stronger and more resilient of a person I am now. I really suffered with a ton of anxiety. I mean, that's really what led to my divorce. And now it's like, if anything, I lack anxiety, like I'm going to Africa on a 2-week camping safari in a few weeks. And just, it's like, I have this energy, and I want to live every single moment. So getting back to that Philip Stone. So Dr. Philip Stone, he is the director of the Institute for Dark Tourism Research at the University of Lancashire in the UK. And he's the world's foremost expert in dark tourism. So I put out this concise edition of my book, and sure enough, this Philip Stone contacts me, says he read the book, liked it. And so we had been in contact. And so he was one of the first people to read my full edition before it was even fully edited. He had read my full edition of the book, and he really liked that even more. And he wrote the foreword to it. So that kind of came full circle in a real short amount of time.
Which is a really amazing journey, how that evolved. And I love when sometimes when you're aligned with what you're meant to put out in the world, how it can just all like dominoes, right?
Right.
But I also loved how you shared, Chad, that, you didn't want to read anything else. You just wanted to come in with your own perspective, because I feel sometimes you have to share your truth without it being peppered by others. And then later on, you get that confirmation like you did, having that that contact saying, hey, I read your book, I liked it, So it's really nice that, I just love that the different perspective of like how we experience those places, but also how you're saying that can be such a place of growth and a place of like moving through and almost healing, because I feel it's almost when you were sharing it before, it's almost like taking you out of your little world. It's not, it's almost out of that ego mindset, because you see that things are bigger than you, and you realize that, hey, actually I need to make a difference in this world, or I need to serve how I'm meant to serve, or share what I'm meant to share. And I'm meant to do it in a way that will honor every day of my life, because I don't know how precious life is. And I feel it's interesting how you've got this dark tourism reflection, but then also been through the need to have a new liver to save your life. So you even have that aspect of, hey, your life, like treat every day like, it's gold, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it boils down to the concept of memento mori, which is Latin for "remember you must die," and it was a phrase that they
Mm.
used back when generals from the Roman times, they would have parades for them, and they would whisper in their ear "memento mori" when they started getting too cocky, and it was a reminder that like to humble them. And then the Christians caught on to it in the around the Elizabethan era, and then also the Victorian era, it got popular again. And it's why we have skulls and crossbones on grave sites. And like they used to have rings with skulls on them, and it was just a reminder. It's usually after when somebody passed away, they would wear a ring with a skull and crossbone on it, and it was a reminder that of that person, but it's also a reminder to live every moment. And I think when you go to dark tourism spots as well as religious pilgrimages, I mean, it's a reminder to live every second, because life is fragile. And that's what I wrote about with the catacombs throughout the whole book, but particularly the catacombs in Paris. So I've been there a couple times. I mean, there's 6 million people in the catacombs in Paris, where they took them from the graves because the graves are overfilling, and they brought them down into the catacombs. So you have about 6 foot high, what meters wise, about 1.5 meters high and 1.5 meters deep, of these skulls and bones of these people, and you're walking through these tight, dark tunnels in there, and you would think it'd be super creepy. And for me, and when I brought my son there once, and I was married, and I brought my wife there once, and we all kind of had those same reflections. Is it wasn't creepy to us, it wasn't scary to us, it was more humbling. It was kind of like the memento mori thought. It's like, we're gonna die, and when you walk out, it becomes kind of all dark tourism spots when you get to the other side. You have reflections on the fragility of life. You have, the meaning of life comes into perspective more. It's like, I could tell you what my meaning of life is, but when you go through there, it's like you really feel the meaning of life. And the meaning of life for me is my friends and family and helping people. And I could have said that maybe before, but I wouldn't have felt it. But when you go through enough of these places, you start really feeling it. Or maybe for somebody that's a little more sensitive to these places, it might be one time going through a place like that, and it changes your life.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a good reminder, because I heard this, I don't know who said it, but it's like, we're all on the same trajectory to death, but you can choose to take one step closer to death, or evolve and keep changing your life every day, and it's a good reminder that, you can keep challenging yourself each day. You can choose to show up how you want to show up in the world, rather than just staying in the same routine and the same, patterns that aren't fulfilling you, that aren't exciting you. You only get one go at this life. Why not make it actually count and do what you need to do? It's really it's such a refreshing perspective, Chad, and how to look at these places differently, and how to use it as a place for growth, like you said at the start. Yeah.
I would say it's similar to, there's a handful of things that'll change your life in an instant, a serious illness, death of a loved one. But then there's also some things that, you can seek out to do, like a long course of therapy, or psychedelics is another way that it kind of takes pieces of yourself and puts them back together. Going through military conflicts and boot camp and things like that can do that. Also, the astronauts, they have this thing called overview effect, where they see the world so small and so beautiful, and space, how big space is, and how like they're just like a grain of a sand on the world's biggest beach, is all they are, and or smaller. And you just realize how small you are in the world, and how fragile life truly is. And when you have those types of experiences, your life is changed. You are not the same person anymore. And so some of those things are safer than others. And I would say dark tourism is probably one of the safest, most cost-effective ways to change your life in a hurry.
Yeah. My soul's still like, no, I can't even watch. I can't even watch violent movies. They infect me that much these days. So, but at the same time, I wouldn't say I'm very aware of it, but at the same time, I'm very respectful too. I'm very respectful for souls that have passed, because part of my gifts is that I can help souls leave the body once they're passed and move on. So, it's very, and even, okay, and they're saying just share this story. So we had this incident when I was at work, and there was a ghost and it was an angry ghost. I don't know if you believe in ghosts or not. Possibly you've been to all these places.
Anyway, the jury is out for me personally. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll tell you a story after your story.
Okay, all right. I'll try and convince you with my story. So anyway, So I came in after Christmas, and I usually set up my space, and I actually energetically clear it and things like that too. But anyway, and I had this I don't know, this lolly jar, and I thought I'll just bring it to work because we don't really eat lollies, and then the other staff can share it or whatever. So I put this jar on the desk, and I was like, something doesn't feel right. And then the jar got thrown across the room and smashed against the wall.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, wow, like that's crazy. And then all this stuff kept falling off the walls. And I went in at lunchtime to the other staff and I said, there's a ghost in here. They're like, yes, there is. They're like, oh my goodness, all this weird stuff's been happening. Anyway, and then our boss came in and I said to him, there's a ghost here. He goes, no, it's just the vibrations from the building next door because they were digging quite low. And I was like, no, there's a ghost here. And even the other staff were like, there's a ghost here. And I said, I can clear it, but I need your permission because it's not my space. And he goes, yeah, that's fine. You do what you need to do. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it turned out that he was kind of right because the ghost had come from the building site next door. And what had happened was they dug so deep down, so many layers down that they disturbed like a very, 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 very old gravesite.
Yeah.
Right, burial site. So all these spirits had come up. So then I get this kind of message from God, source, divine, whatever you resonate with, higher being, saying you need to go clear all those spirits. And I was like, what are you talking about? I do one at a time. They're like, no, you need to go clear them all. They're like really angry.
Wow.
And I said, okay, well, how am I going to do that? And they said, well, you've got to go to the building site. You've got to ask someone permission to sit on the building site, put a salt circle around you. So don't underestimate the power of salt, right? Put a salt circle around you and then clear all the, like you normally do, but clear them all en masse. And I was like, so you want me to go up to this like building site and talk to these strangers about like, and they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay. So I left for work really early. So I had this space and I was like driving to work and I was freaking out. I'm like, these people are going to think I'm crazy. You know, like I don't know who they are. They're not going to let me on the site. You know, this is insane. Anyway, and I get there and I park across the road and I'm like, why can't I just do it from over here? It's all energetically connected. They're like, you can, but we just had to know that you were going to go do that anyway. So I'm sitting across the road in my little salt circle and the line of souls that showed up, it was insane. Like it was just like in my mind's eye, I could see this massive line of spirits just ready to cross over. And I'm like, wow, like they really shook it up. And there was one kind of tribe, I guess, and the leader was so angry. He's like, how dare they disturb our resting place? And rah, rah, rah. I said, I know you're really angry. So none of his clan would move over. And I said, that's fine. I know you're really angry, but can you just step aside because I've got all these other souls that want to move through at the moment and I've got a limited time. Period. So he's like, anyway, I said, okay. So I kept clearing all these souls and then I got to him and I said, I know you're angry, but we can't actually change it, you know, and this will help you rest in peace kind of thing. And he's like, all right. So then he walked through and everyone else walked through and then I could shut it all off, break the circle, etc. Then I had to go back to my office and then I could clear the angry ghost because he was still quite angry, but at least he shifted over. But that was like that whole chain of events. But I've had other things where I was at home and my husband was out. He was staying in the city with friends and I felt someone sit on the end of my bed and my son was in with me because he was just sleeping next to me. He was quite little. I think he was like 3. And I thought, you know, maybe he came home, you know, that's fine, whatever. I was like, you know, and I'm talking and there was no response, but I could feel the weight. I could kick the weight on the end of my bed and there was actually nobody there. And I was like, man, and this house where we rented, my son's very sensitive and he refused to sleep in his room. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was on something because we had constant spirits coming through and things like that. So anyway, that's my ghost story. One of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, so, you know, I'm not a medium or anything like that. So I've never experienced anything like that. The closest I've ever experienced was I had a spiritual, I think it was a spiritual thing because I was at the at the Vatican and I had heard I don't know if it was a voice or by thought. It was just like it was like a thought inserted in my head, and it was a foggy road going to work, and it said, "Chad, slow down. There's a car coming at you." And I'm like, "What?"
Mm.
And so I white
Mm.
knuckled it and slowed down, and sure enough, within probably 30 seconds, there was a car just steaming at me, and I reacted so fast to it would have been a head-on collision, 100% guaranteed, and it would have not fared well. And they pulled over, I pulled over, and I actually felt really at peace. Like usually I'd be coming out of my car like, "You fucker, I'm gonna," but I was completely at peace, and it was a bunch of young kids going to school. It was early in the morning, and yeah, that was quite the experience. And then I had another experience. I was at the Western Wall in Jerusalem, which is the Jewish, the most sacred place in Judaism. And you can deliver notes directly to God. And I wrote a note and gave it to God. And actually he answered me, because I had been struggling with my divorce for a few years, like really like even struggling with the, is God even real type of thing, like how could he take this away if and he basically talked to me and said, I give you love, but it's not my, it's your deal to tend it. It's like a garden, you tended it well, maybe the other person didn't. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. So I guess from then on, again, I've been more spiritual and a believer. But recently I stayed at the Lizzie Borden house. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that was like, the OJ trial, or the two princes that disappeared at the Tower of London. It's similar to the, like we all know kind of who did it. And so this lady, Lizzie Borden, murdered her parents, and it's back in the late 1800s. And well, they think she did it, but I actually think she was innocent. But I stayed in her bedroom by myself one night because it's a Borden. I was in the house for like an hour by myself for a while, and it's supposed to be one of the most haunted places in the world. The only thing I experienced there is I actually did a tour during the day. They have tours there every day that go through the house, and in the basement I heard kids laughing, and so did other people, but there were no kids on our tour. So that was the closest that I've ever come to an actual like ghost encounter that I know of. But anyway, all these dark tourism places, I mean, you feel things. You feel that you're on hallowed ground. I mean, I like when I go to a cemetery, when I go to, I've gone to many haunted houses. I mean, you feel that there's something more going on. You feel an energy, I guess, is maybe a way of putting it.
Yeah, definitely. And when you just shared that, I actually had a memory triggered from when I was younger, because we have Port Arthur here in Australia, where they had like a massacre at this site, and but it was already haunted to start with, right? So it was already a lot of convict settlers and things like that went there, and then this happened on top of it. And it was really interesting being in this house, and they're like, "Oh yeah, normally it's haunted." And at that time I wasn't tuning in, but I could sense something, and I was like, there's definitely something here, and they're not happy that we're here. Like, it was actually like, they're not happy that we're here, we need to leave. Like, it was, and it's this interesting energy too. And I feel like it just depends on what's behind it. And it was interesting what you said, where you stayed in the house. It was so weird. I just heard straight away when you said that, possessed. Like, it was so weird. So, it's really... Yeah. And this is kind of just what happens, right? Like the more, and I love that you shared that experience, but of what, because I had something similar with the car, and it's like learning to trust those things when they come through, and they'll always come through. It's divine timing, and you can choose to listen to it or not listen to it, and it's, and like you said, that feeling of peace is because you're not alone, right? And I feel that's the whole perspective of everything that you've shared, Chad, is that we're bigger, like it's bigger than us. And it's all about being humble and coming back to realizing that there's something more than you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key phrase you just said is, it's something bigger. I think no religion, no one person has all the answers. I think every religion is a compass. Every spiritual thought is like a compass, and but it all points to magnetic north, and that's God, and whatever that is,
Yeah.
So that's how I choose to believe. But I choose to do it through being a Christian. But I've gone to other services and other religions, and I feel just as spiritual going to those, if not more, actually, than going to my Catholic church.
Yeah, Catholics are a whole different thing. We won't unpack that on this show. And as we finish our time together, Chad, I asked the guests to come on the show if you could heal or change something in the world, what would it be?
Well, since I'll keep on the theme, I would say keep an open mind and step outside of your comfort zone and kind of trust that when you go outside of your comfort zone, especially if you're dealing with anxiety or, an illness or depression, having some faith and hope that stepping outside your comfort zone and going through a phase that I would call reckoning, where it's not easy, it's difficult. Going through a lot of these places that I'm talking about is difficult. But when you do that, you literally can improve your own resilience, your strength, your emotional intelligence, which is a huge thing for, it's more important than just regular intelligence for a vast majority of things. And you can become more emotionally intelligent by stepping outside of your comfort zone.
100%. Definitely. And if people want to come find your book, Chad, or they want to come work with you, where can they find you?
So my book is available in all the regular, places online like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Blackstone, that type of stuff. And then you can find me online. My only real social media is Facebook, so it's Chad Scott Author. And then I also have a website, which is has quite a bit of information on it. And that's drchadscott.com.
Beautiful. And I'll make sure to include all of that in the show notes as well so people can find you. So a big thank you, Chad, for being on the show and having that different perspective about dark tourism and, how it actually helped you grow and heal and come back to realizing that life is bigger than what you make it out to be. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, Catherine. And I should say too, it's also an audiobook and it's on all the regular platforms for that too. I know a lot of podcast listeners also like audiobooks, so I should throw that out there.
Yes, definitely. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.